I'm going to show you 13 different techniques of leaf painting, where each technique has its own subtle approach. I will start with the most common and simple processes, then move to advanced and professional tips that are a little bit more nuanced. I'll also explain why I prefer some techniques for some types of leaves over others. Hi, I'm Leila, a professional artist. Once again, welcome to my studio. Today's video will have lots of tips and tricks, and if you might like to rewatch it, feel free to subscribe so that you can bookmark this channel and come back here anytime you want to. And if you press the notification bell, you will be notified by YouTube about my next upcoming videos. And now let's get into the cool stuff. In this tutorial, I will also be reviewing a set of natural bristle brushes. These are artist grade set of 9 watercolor quill brushes from Meeden. The brand did send them to me. You know, I like being very transparent about products that I use and very honest about what I think about them too. I will leave links under the video. Now, I wanted to do it just like I do with other brands and not register for the affiliate program. But brand representative told me that if I do that, you guys will not be able to get a discount. So the links under the video are affiliate, which means that I will earn a small percentage if you buy through them. But it will give you a chance to save even more than what I would earn. If for some reason you have something, against that, you can always just go and look up these products, not through the links, but on their website directly. It is entirely up to you. The only reason why I'm even saying all of this is because I like to be very honest about what's going on. Straight away, I can tell you that the bristle is amazing. It is very soft and it comes to a perfect point. Can't wait to test them out with paint. The handles are comfortable to hold in your hand. These are the artist grade brushes. If you like very stiff watercolor brushes, then you probably will not like these. Look at this beauty. New favorite, maybe? Maybe I'm speaking too soon. I don't know. I really want to try them out. You guys, look at this. I was wondering if anyone out there makes more of an affordable version of natural squirrel bristle to this quality. You can literally do a calligraphy writing with this brush. Here are some dry brushing strokes, scribbles with the tip, and I'm just using size 1. It really reminds me of all the cool things that I used to be able to do with my Russian brushes. Wow, you guys. It even has a wooden handle like this, but the handle has a coating, so it's protected. You know what else this brush will be perfect for? Gouache. That tip is incredible. This is just wow. This is the best tip that I've seen in the brushes in some while, I think. Okay, I can't wait to try these brushes in action. Leaves, whether they're in autumn or in the spring, are very inspirational subject matter, and many artists throughout history were fascinated with the colors foliage could create in the landscape. Now, this first technique is the most simple and would require 1 to 2 colors only. You can go for a standard green color that you can get in the bottle, or you can mix your own green by combining yellow and blue of your choice. This technique does not really require a preliminary graphite sketch, but you can if it will be helpful. The simplicity of this style is created by the use of a brush with a good tip, where you can create a very fine point and then press the body of the brush stronger onto the paper and create a wider area. But even though you are using the same color all throughout your leaves, you can always create diversity by adding more or less water to your paint. This is a great watercolor exercise for beginners. It will teach you how to create different values while using the same shade. Don't be afraid to overlap some of the petals and let the color run from one area of the leaf into the other. You can go over some of the leaves if you want to really define them and create a darker effect. Lots of leaves and branches would suit this technique perfectly, like for example olive trees or anything where you've got quite a few elongated but also oval leaves on the branch. I can tell you already that the point on these brushes is just perfect. It's just wow. I'm using a very thick brush with a very nice juicy barrel that holds a lot of water, but the control of the water dispensation, I'm blown away, you guys. So what do you think about this exercise? It really just barely takes a couple of minutes to complete, and just one color. As I said, you can mix it or you can use it out of the tube. The difference in intensity of the pigment that's suspended in the paint creates the variation that you really want for that three-dimensional look in your sketches. And even if you are a total beginner, please give it a go. I can promise you will absolutely love this technique. If you are enjoying videos that I'm making here for you on YouTube, you might like to check out my Patreon page, because I make extra videos over there and more in-depth videos, really thorough step-by-step follow-alongs, as well as feedback videos on your art and much more communication, so that I can do more things that you would like to see next. Also remember, by pledging, you are supporting this channel here. So I'd really love to meet you over there. Next technique is based a little bit on this one, but it has a little twist. And you can use any two colors, whether you want to go for blue and yellow, for brown and green, depending on how abstract you want your final result to be or how realistic. So here I'm using Apatite Genuine from Daniel Smith and a Deep Scarlet from the same brand. Now your main color has to be really heavily loaded onto the brush belly, and then the other color should be introduced to half or just the tip of the brush. Keep going until your brush runs out of paint, or the paint mixes up into one color. Like you can see here, the color becomes more brown. If you want to keep the separation going, it means you need to rinse your brush clean and load everything on like you did the first time. You can see that in this technique I'm also showing you how to make a leaf with just two brush strokes, which results in a larger and a little bit rounder shape. You can always go back in and add more details or more characteristics to these leaves. I'm not going to do too much because this is just a little demonstration. You can create beautiful variations with this technique as well. You can create elongated leaves, you can use a smaller brush for smaller leaves, and so on. This also works beautifully for petals, especially if you load the paint on that's quite diluted. See here it's quite intense, but if you're working on some kind of a rose or something like this, that change between, for example, orange and pink or yellow and orange can be absolutely stunning. Now the third technique works wonderfully when we have more than one color variation which goes over one side of the leaf, especially when it's quite a chaotic one, so no clear pattern. You can create a pencil sketch, but you don't have to. So the first thing you want to do is assess what is the majority of the color of that leaf is. For example, is it more orange, green? You can mix that color separately on the palette or go straight from the tube if that color is available for you in single pigment. The idea is to create a perfect base for your wet on wet paint application. your first layer should be really saturated with water. If you've applied one layer and notice that the paper is soaking all the water up, or maybe you're working in a dry environment, reapply that layer again with more water. Then approach it with the other color that is mixed into the majority of the tone. Here I'm using cobalt teal to create a really soft green shade. Notice how I did not pre-mix this green on the palette, but I'm mixing it straight into the artwork. That way I can create a very intense color. And next I'm going to do the same thing with red. Now the beauty of this technique is that it can easily go for a beginner and then for someone who is quite advanced. Keep working on the leaf until you are happy, whatever your level is. It also works really well when there are more than just two colors mixed on the same leaf. It's also a very quick technique, and you need to make sure that you're working on your leaf while it is damp, because once it dries, all of your lines will be very finely defined, which can also be a plus if you want to do those final little details at the end. So our technique number 3 is a multicolored wet on wet style. Now technique number 4 is a real fun technique, and it's one of those techniques that can provide you with a very strong intense color, which is especially useful when working on autumn leaves. It is also very useful when working on leaves with areas missing. Now the essence of this technique is hidden in water drops. These water drops can be dispersed with the pipette, or you can also use your regular water brush, wherever you have handy. You can try doing it with the brush, but it's a little bit hard to get as much water beading on the paper. What you need to do next is grab a medium-sized brush. I'm using size 5. You want to really load up your brush with reasonably dry paint. It should be diluted enough only to the point where it is movable, because you want the intensity. You want there to be so much water that it almost bubbles on your paper in the shape of the object that you are painting. You can move paint around by changing the tilt of your artwork and let gravity create the most beautiful natural patterns. Then, when you're done with tilting it and applying all the different colors that you like, leave it to dry. Do not use a hair dryer or any other way of drying it. Leave it as it is. Might take a while, but it is definitely worth waiting for. And the results always surprise me. It will look very different when it's dry. Wow, look at this. So see, now that it's dry, you can see how, that's exactly what I said, how uncontrollable this is. Oh, Porsche, no. He just walked all over the paper that I prepared for this tutorial. Okay, so here we have like these blooms, and not just blooms, even with a little bit of granulation or some kind of a texturization that's happened there. And I never can predict what happens. Sometimes you get really dark outline alone, and everything sort of fades from light to that sharp edge. But whatever it does, you see how beautiful it is for showing different little spots here. That's why I like this technique for the leaves that have little holes in them. Now let's get into the detail and finish things up. I'm super amazed by these brushes. They're just wow. No effort at all to create a thin line. It just sucks itself up and turns into this perfect little point. You can add any kind of detail that you want to give it a really nice finished look. And I'm just going to refine those little crevices. Here we go. What do you think about this technique? Now, my favorite thing about this, as I said, is that it works perfectly with these little holes. Another thing that I really love is that natural variation of color that leaves sometimes create when they turn orange or yellow, from green. And you can use any colors with this technique too. This technique creates that specific unpredictability like the autumn itself. So this is what I love this technique for. Now this next technique is a lot of fun. And again, it is absolutely suitable for a beginner, and even an advanced artist can use this trick in their art here and there. This technique will require you using a color pencil. Make sure that it's one of those oil-based color pencils. If you don't have one like that, then perhaps you can use an oil pastel. But oil pastels are just a little bit thicker, and so will create a bit of a different look. Like previous leaves, this leaf has a much lighter vein going through it compared to the rest of its body. So to reserve that light space, I'm going to use an oil-based color pencil. You want to make sure that you're applying it generously. You can use a variation of colors, whatever it is that is suiting your subject matter. So here I'm using a brush number 6 and using the mix of scarlet red and carmine. Now for the fun of it, I'm going to mix in a little bit of quinacridone purple. Now for this technique, you don't want to use too much water or super thick paint, because both of those things will flood your pencil lines. If that does happen, like I have in here in a couple of places, wash your brush, reabsorb, and then dry. And while the paint is damp, I'm going to add a little bit of darker green around the edges in some places. You can use any technique of paint application that you like working with, and any colors, whether realistic or a little bit strange. The difference between this technique and just painting around, or for example, sometimes people can take a little bit of gouache and premix that and paint that on top, is that when you create these lines first with a pencil, it almost looks like, it has that feeling of it curving in the paper itself, just like the leaf, because areas under the pencil do not absorb water. Therefore, when the paper buckles, it creates more of a three-dimensional look. And most of the paint, especially if you're working more wet and wet than even this example here, it kind of goes towards these lines and creates these very natural shadows. Another thing that's beautiful about this technique is that when you actually spray onto the leaf or you create any kind of other effect, the paint will keep running off. Most of it, at least. You can see how when I sprayed the darker green color, that it actually landed on some of these, but then you see here it's separated, so it creates a really cool effect. I love this technique. Now the technique number 6 is my favorite, one of my favorite personal techniques. Usually is one of my go-to when I'm sketching outdoors or on the go, and for this I'm going to use a ginkgo leaf. Now here you can use a technique that we've used before. Any technique for creating an underpainting or mixed in colors will work just fine. Then we need to leave this to perfectly dry. Next, you're going to need a pen. You can use a thinner or a thicker pen depending on the result you want to achieve or on the size of your sketch. You can also use different color pens as well to create a very different look. Make sure that you study the direction of the veins in this technique. It's very important. You can use any color to create the vein pattern, and you can see how it will create a very different feel. You can go with the realistic color. Some leaves do turn the veins red, for example, in the autumn. Or you can just go for an interesting color without having to have a reason for it, which can also be a lot of fun. Now technique number 7 is perfect for the leaves when you are having a little bit of texture on them. Little holes, little specks, little uneven bits and pieces. For this technique, you can also sketch your leaves with a pencil or just go in with the brush. Then you grab alcohol spray and apply little spritz. Make sure that you are holding your bottle far away so that you're not, going with really large areas, unless of course you're working in a very large leaf. Now you can either leave it like this, or you can take a small brush and start adding more details. That's what I'm going to do. This technique especially works beautifully on really dark colors because the little specks are even more obvious on a dark watercolor. You can see the beautiful irregular texture that alcohol has created on paper, and it makes it interesting and also helps to portray that look with little light blemishes. Technique number 8 works beautifully when you have a little bit of mold, or when the leaves go kind of black on one edge while still nice and bright everywhere else. Here we start like we usually do with applying paint. And now I'm going to make a mix of black, Mars black, with a little bit of brown. Both have a tendency to granulate. To make this effect even stronger, I'm going to use granulating medium. And let's watch the magic happen. You can add more paint if you feel that it's not strong enough and move it around. The trick here is to have a little bit of free-flowing granulating medium with the paint. That way you will get the most beautiful sediment. If you would like to know more about how to intensify or reduce granulation in your watercolor, I have a really in-depth video on that where I talk about all the aspects of granulation, which will help you minimize or intensify it. I also want to bring it to your attention that even though my artwork is a little bit upright, I have the leaf upside down because I want for all of that granulation to be going down this way versus going down that way because of the actual leaf shape itself and the pattern on it. You don't have to use granulating medium. You can use water, but the effect will not be as strong. Because this area is dry, I'm just going to go in and apply other details. If you'd like to know how to paint or draw a water drop, I do have a video on that as well here on YouTube, so you can watch that too. All the videos I'm mentioning in this video that I think might be helpful, I always leave in the video description box. So just go over there after you finished watching this and find another video that will help explain more about what you've seen here. Now, technique number 9 is one of those techniques that can be used by teachers with their kids, or it can even be used by professional artists, again, depending on how far you are willing to take this. You will need to cut out a shape of the leaf. How intricate you want to go is entirely up to you. I'm just going to do a very quick one, because I'm just showing you the essence of the technique, and then you can take it further. You can make it smaller, larger, more colorful, or go with just a limited palette. It is entirely up to you. So this is the shape of your leaf. If you don't like that shape, you can go in and add more or remove more or whatever it is. As I said, because I'm just doing it for demonstration purposes, this is sufficient enough So now I am placing it right here. You can hold it down with some things and the fun begins. First thing you do is you grab a really rough old brush. You can even use a toothbrush. You load up your brush with quite a bit of paint and then spray. Then you grab a spray bottle. Add details of any kind. Now I'm showing you the most simplified version, but if you would like to, you can always pre-paint the layer of color or colors that you'd like before you start spraying or doing anything. And you can play with what is going to be damp and what is going to be dry and so on. So this is the most simple version that I'm showing you here. I really like the way the spray creates this really interesting texture on the leaf too. You can leave it to dry completely, or here, because I didn't use too much water, I think I can remove this now. And here we go. Now this technique works really well with other techniques that I've showed you before, like for example granulation, or once everything is dry you can go over certain areas with a black pen as well. But what I love about this is the texture and that really free flowing effect that it can create. Perfect for those of you that like going into more of the simplified or abstract look as well. And you can always add extra bits and pieces when the protective paper is removed. I love the contrast between the really hard edge and the very delicate texture of the leaf in this technique. Although you can always find your own way of doing it too. There is just something about this technique that reminds me of those skeleton leaves, you know, when sometimes the flesh of the leaf rots away and you have that little skeleton of the webbed veins, you know, that transparency. And you can create this transparency even stronger by spraying less water, so having these little dots just sitting on the white paper. There are just so many variations that you can do with this technique, and there's always a way to soften the edges. If you want to, you can just go over with a soft brush and create a little bit of the softer look. I'm not going to do it everywhere, but I will just in a couple of places because it is a demonstration, so I want to show as many possibilities for you guys as I can. I also like that softened look as well because it sort of creates that warmth, you know, with all the leaves decomposing, and so you've got that warmth that's coming from the ground. Now this next technique is great when trying to create these uneven patches, but with a little bit more of the stringiness in them. I'll show you exactly what I mean. And for this technique, we're going to need to use gum arabic. You probably know gum arabic as a binder, or at least one of the main ingredients in the binder for watercolor and gouache paint. But here I will show you what you can use this for to create a really special effect. Just like before, depending on how complicated your leaf is, you can choose to do pencil sketch. As you can see, I don't specifically adhere to the representation of actual leaves, but I do take inspiration to show you just a little bit more of an impact with colors, textures, and so on. Now the fun begins. What you want to do is you want to create a layer of paint. First, we can just apply a little bit of water. Shall we make it green this time around? So I'm using chromium green oxide. Many people think it's a very boring color, but I think it's beautiful and natural. Next, what you want to do, you can go in there straight with a brush, but I don't want to do that because I don't want to contaminate my gum arabic bottle. So you can just use a pipette, for example, and put a few drops into the paint. So here I'm just mixing everything together. Now the paint is very thick, as you can see. It sort of becomes almost a little bit gloopy. But because gum arabic has no color, it's still quite transparent. It's almost dry now, still a little bit damp. you can just apply this layer. So the whole shape of the leaf can be covered with this. And you can make your color as intense as you'd like. I'm going for a very light color. Now I'm going to wash my brush quite well and grab quite a bit of quite an intense color, but without the gum arabic, and just dab a little bit through and then see how it branches out. Now you will see the really cool effect. It almost like sort of puts out these fillers and fingers rather than just completely blending out like normally the paint would. You can help it as well by making gravity come into this as well and moving it around. And I'm going to do more of it in some other areas too. Absolutely any color would work with this technique, whether as a base coat or the additional spots. The main thing is that the bottom layer should have gum arabic premixed. The things to remember though is because of the addition of gum arabic, the paint will be drying a little bit longer. Now the trick here is to apply enough gum arabic with the paint as a first layer and then use reasonably watery but intense color. And now I'm using quinacridone burnt orange for some extra little spots here and there. A little bit of deep green. This leaf is almost looking like a tree in blooms at this stage, doesn't it? Okay, let's wait for this to dry so we can come back with more details. Okay, so now it's almost dry. These shiny bits there, they're dry. They're just shiny because of gum arabic. So what I'm going to do next is grab a smaller brush. So this is a size 3. Go through and add few details. In some areas I'm using lighter color and in some darker. You can see how I went really full on with this technique, and it's created this really beautiful, almost book illustration like tree-like little shape. It's very cute. But you can always use it in a more subtle way for a more realistic effect. You can see how beautiful and colorful and unexpected or dark you can make this, depending on what colors you choose to use. This technique is beautiful because you can see these tiny little, almost like tentacles that the paint releases because gum arabic offers that resistance to it, spreading like it normally would in the water. That's why I love this. I don't use gum arabic technique very often, but there are some situations where it can really bring out your playfulness. And I think painting leaves, autumn leaves especially, is definitely one of those. Let's move on to the next technique. This next technique is a little bit different, and it can also help you to create the very delicate nature of some of the leaves. Like for example, the leaf of the flamingo tree. It is so delicate, it's almost semi-transparent. And the color that it holds, you know, the soft pink color that turns a little bit green in the spring is absolutely amazing. So how can we show this softness, this change that can happen with the color? By the way, guys, if you hear the sound, it's just my cat that's decided to come and just plump on my computer. For this technique, we're not going to paint leaves themselves like I previously showed you. In this technique, we're actually going to create their color first and then paint the leaves into it. So here I'm using the largest brush in the set, brush number 9. Now, before I put any paint on, I'm going to spray the paper with just clean water. Then I'm going to pick up a little bit of magenta and just dab this like that. What other colors do I see in there? A little bit of lime green, but in a really soft way. And some rutile yellow for that milky yellow. Now this is already drying up, so I'm just putting little, spraying some more water in the areas that were too dry. Now trick here is not to continuously spray, but to go in little spritz. This kind of a look is definitely enough, but if you want to, you can always sprinkle some salt to add to that texture. I also like how salt can move colors as well. So all I need to do now is leave that to completely dry, to the point where we can scrape the salt off and apply a layer of definition. Now that this is all dry, you can see how beautiful the texture that this technique has created of spraying and then applying salt. You can see larger bubbles where the salt has been and little specks from the spray application. Okay, let's get rid of salt. Look at the leaf and the shape. So you can go two ways about this. You can use a pen of, for example, in this case, like a magenta kind of a, or maybe even wine red color. Because I don't have that specific color, I only have really bright red, I'm going to use the brush, which will also be a good test for the smaller brushes in this set. So on my brush I have a mix of quinacridone magenta and quinacridone burnt orange. If it makes it easier for you, you can always sketch things with the pencil. All I need to do now is just create this almost outline-like pattern. Now the trick here is to touch your paper only with the tip of the brush, not the side, and go really light-handed so that the line is a little bit broken. We can do another branch at the back. And now, of course, you can leave this at this stage as well, but if you want to, you can go back in and you can add a little bit more definition with diluting some of these. Now this technique can also work really well in the autumn, and you're looking down and you see this beautiful carpet of orange and yellow and green. So this technique, depending on what colors you use with it, can really help you create that sort of a look of a carpet as well. You can use oranges and yellows and all sorts of colors, granulating or flat colors. And at the end, because it is autumn, you can use dark brown or black ink if you'd like to. You can do some negative painting. This technique is very free. You can do so many things with it. Now this technique is loose and free and really undefined. Of course, you can go over and outline things with, for example, black or something like this, but I think I'm going to leave this with these soft colors just for a change, because most of the leaves that I've been showing you guys are more of the autumn leaves. So this is a little bit more of that freshness, you know, that spring brings. But as I said, you can obviously use this technique to create a very different feel as well, but also in that very loose, very leafy kind of a way. Now this next technique is going to involve using an actual leaf. You might also like to have something to press your leaf with as well. The first thing I want to do is apply paint onto the leaf, especially the side of the leaf that has quite a bit of texture. The paint should be thick enough to spread through the leaf. If it beads on the leaf, that's not that much of a problem. In fact, it can create a very interesting texture. You can use one or more colors. All day today while I've been filming, my cat goes and sits on the windowsill, warms up, and then goes and lies on my computer. I don't know if this computer cool him off. Very interesting. So next what you want to do is pick up the leaf and then apply it onto the paper face down with the side that has just been painted. Now there are two different variations on how you can do it. On the dry paper, or on a damp paper. I'll show you that in a second. I'll go a little bit stronger because it's a second print, but you can reapply paint and apply all sorts of things. Here we go. And of course, as with most of the techniques, you can leave things there where they are. It looks very interesting as is, or you can always go in and add a little bit of water or leave, add extra colors and things like that. So like here with this dry one, we can apply little areas where paint can run into water. Add other colors. I'll just add a little bit of blue because I think that's the only color I haven't used so far in this tutorial. As I said, these leaves don't have to be super duper realistic. You can if you want to, or you can go and have fun with purples and blues and things like that. You can also spray water on the leaf as well, and it will haze out, especially while the paint is damp. I'll just show you a little corner of it. You see how it's all sort of going and running. And let's have a look at the leaf that I've printed on the wet. And you can see how the actual leaf literally paints itself. So you can create many different variations. You can reuse the same leaf because we're using watercolor. You can rinse it off, and if you like that pattern, you can go over. Try different types of leaves. Try herbs and other things. It is a really, really fun technique. This can be done on cards. This can be done with children as an exercise. It can be done in so many different ways. Or if you're a teacher, for example, you can do this with your class, collecting the leaves and then letting them paint themselves. And of course, where I've sprayed it with water, you can spray a diluted color already, so then you are layering one color on top of the other and so on. So this is a really, really fun thing to do. And this is the kind of a thing where you don't really need to have a lot of preliminary skill. You can just go in and try something like that. It's fun. And of course, if you have been painting for a while, you can take this next step and add other things, make this a part of a larger work as well. So possibilities are endless. You can do whatever you want with this. And a little note, if you want to do this with, for example, your class, metallics look absolutely beautiful with this technique. So you can try some metallic watercolor or gouache. This would do wonders. And now, last but not least, a reasonably well-known technique. It's not new, but the reason why I wanted to do this last is because that's the only technique that has the possibility to embrace all of the previous techniques that I showed you. This is the technique where you can use and connect any of the things that I've showed you, and that technique is layering. By the way, if you're wondering, it does not involve your cat sitting on the palette. You can do it without that component to the tutorial. So for this one, I will be working off an image that I have opened on my computer. As always, feel free to do a preliminary pencil sketch. Portia, you alright? You spent too long on the sun. Are you having a sunstroke? Okay, we might have to have a little break for this strange emergency. Okay, he's all right. Let's get back to sketching. And some have a separate beginning, almost like tree branches. Okay, so with glazing, what you want to do is always start with the lighter color. So here I have this kind of a orangey yellow that I'm going to mix up with the use of quinacridone gold and Hansa yellow deep. Gamboge yellow would go really well for this color as well, if you have that on your palette. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to apply this wash all over. You see how the tip of the brush really helps me to create these little ridges and texture on the edge. If you're working in a really dry environment, you can apply a little bit of water first before doing this. Even though this is a sunny day here, it is quite humid still because it's Auckland, New Zealand. So I do have enough time to work all of this in. Now, if you have any lighter areas, what you can do is you can wash your brush, absorb the moisture and reabsorb. This will be a good reabsorption test for this for these brushes as well. Yeah, that's looking really well. A little bit here. And a little bit here. Now, because this is a glazing technique, we need to make sure that when we're layering the paint on, it has to be super dry. So as dry as it can be. That's why once the paint feels dry on the surface, you can give it a good nice blast with a hair dryer. And the next layer is a little bit more orangey. Mix transparent pyrrole orange with quinacridone gold. Now you see how here you can create wet on wet. Now we can do the same thing with, for example, granulation, or create a layer with gum arabic, or any of those previous techniques that we did. The main key here is to wait for things to dry between the layers. That's why you can actually consider this glazing technique as a king technique in the painting of leaves. Okay, so now on my brush I have a mix of scarlet red and Hansa yellow deep. Even though they're still quite blurry and soft, but they're just a little bit more sectioned. Now while this is still wet, I'm going to introduce a little bit of brown and do a little bit of spot treatment. Now again, dry everything really well. Okay, so now we've got few layers here. We even have some detail. But what I want to do in the next layer, because there's one half of the leaf that's a little bit darker than the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply an overall wash on one side only. Very transparent color, because I want all the colors from the bottom to shine through. Okay, now again, drying. Now for the next layer, I want to use a little bit of granulation. Remember, like we did in one of the previous things. So I'm going to use a mix of black and brown. So I've pre-mixed this with the granulation medium already. And of course, because these are very small areas, we can get into painting more lines and things as well within that same layer. And now just spot layering to intensify the redness of the leaf here and there. To add a little bit more texture, you can use a really rough brush and just stamp it like that. So you can see some layers that contain smooth paint and quite light paint. So see they're picking out through there. And then we also have layers of more intense color and of course granulation right there, and few other areas, and you know, small details and thin tiny little bits and pieces, little aspects of color here and there. So this is the glazing, layering technique, and you can use any of the other techniques that we've used before as well. Like for example, you can print another leaf on top of this, use a pencil at some stage, you know, to go through and to isolate certain areas, for example, if the veins of the leaf are lighter, and so on. And now it is time to look at the brushes. For those of you who are watching this video for the brush review, you guys, I absolutely love these brushes. They are soft but springy at the same time. The tips of on those brushes are absolutely incredible. You saw how I could just do tiny thin little lines, and the barrel of the brush is also quite nice and large and chunky, which means lots of water, long painting strokes, and so on. The one amazing thing that I really loved about these brushes, and I haven't had brushes like this before, where you can really load it up with water, like really load it up, but it's not dripping. You can get a little drip because there'd be a little bit of water collecting on the actual barrel, but that's the kind of thing that would happen with any brush. You can have something like this handy, you know, to wipe this off. But I'm talking about the bristle itself. Like you can see, and there's still so much moisture that as soon as a paper towel touches it, it just, you know, it starts to soak up a lot of water. And the tip on the brush is still perfect, even if you've got quite a bit of water. I mean, of course, you have to monitor and manage these brushes just like any other brush. But those things I just found really interesting. And I have been looking at those because you know how I get very curious about things like that. I've been looking at this, and I think it might be, although I'm not sure, but it might be because they have a really interesting design. So it would have been helpful if it was dry, but I'm just gonna do this. Don't do this with your brushes, but I just want to do this to show you. You see how they've done? They're not done like most other brushes. See, most other brushes, here's another brush. See how all the bristle is pretty much the same length. So it comes to a point because it has a just a way of, I'll see if I can find another brush. So see, they kind of almost all the same length, and then they do come to a point because of course the hairs right on the point are thinner, so you get that, you know, that nice point. But that's why you kind of are missing a barrel on the side here. See, same with this brush as well. I'll just show you. See, when it's wet, it's much thinner here. Now, of course, I'm sure there are some techniques where you would prefer to have those brushes, but I'm just really, you know, I'm just trying to work out these ones. And you see these mop brushes, the amazing thing is that you get the shorter bristle. Again, don't do this to your brush. I'm just doing this to show you. You see, there's almost like layers and steps. And then right there at the end there, you get those ones that come to the point. So you've got these hairs here contributing to the fullness of the brush for it to be able to hold the water and not just drip continuously if if it's quite damp. And also having the really small fine tip because of those hairs right there. And I think the way they've balanced it is just so perfectly in the middle as well. That makes yeah, I really enjoyed working with these. And I can already hear some of you guys saying in the comments, but all mop brushes or quill brushes, you know, they all have that. They do, but I think there's almost like, feels like there's an extra layer of bristle there, just the short bristle, and you can kind of see that it happens in all of them, large ones and small ones. I want to dry them with a hair dryer because it damages the bristles, but I also want to film everything today. Okay, so here we go. So see, like really short ones on the side there, and then the longer ones right in the middle. And I think it just makes it so versatile for a round brush, and just perfect. Now they are at least that's what the brand says, they are an artist grade brushes, so they're not student grade, because they have really high quality natural bristle. This set is the biggest set I think that they have there, so all 9 brushes. But the good thing is that not only can you buy a smaller set with 4 brushes, but you can also buy these individually. Now, I just love when brands do that, because, come on, I mean, having a set of 9 brushes is great. But what if you are not sure? What if you just want to buy one? Maybe you already have plenty of larger brushes, or perhaps you only work on small items in a tiny little sketchbook like that. Why would you need a brush like this? So then you can just go and choose and buy them. I always suggest to look at the prices, no matter how good it is, because sometimes shipping can add on to things. Some countries also require extra tax or whatever. Just go check it out for yourself to see if this is something that you think is worth for you. If you don't want to get a full set, but you want to have a variation of different sizes, then I'd say go for a number 2. Number 2 is quite versatile. Number 1 is a little bit smaller, but number 2 can do all the jobs that number 1 can. Go for this one as well, so number 5. And out of these ones, you probably can go for this and this, or you can go for this. You know, it's up to you. It depends on how large the works that you're doing. Or you can always, if you've got a friend who also wants to get these brushes, just get a set and then divide them between the 2 people. That's probably what I would do if I was a student, for example, and I was on a very tight budget. But again, check the prices out for these ones, because taking into consideration that these are artist grade, these are very, very, very affordable. I always do these reviews, and if there's something that I think that can be done better or that I don't like, I always say those things. And so with these brushes, I really don't know what I would be able to do if I wanted to make them better. This is how I'd probably design them as well. The handles are really lovely. I love the finish, the feeling of it. It's sort of like a matte varnish, almost feels like a wax kind of a thing. It's really nice, really lovely. The length of the brush is perfect for working in sketchbooks or reasonably small paintings. Of course, if you're working on something super large, you might want to have a longer handle. Or if you like working on very lines that you don't want to control much, then again, a longer handle probably would be preferable. So then in that case, maybe look for another set. As always, I will leave all the links under the video and you can go and check them out for yourself. But I am very impressed with these, very impressed. You'll probably see me using these in future tutorials as well. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you got a lot of your maybe questions answered that you're wondering about, or perhaps maybe some of those points and tips actually piqued your interest. Whatever it is, leave me a comment under the video. I promise I read all of them, at least the ones that YouTube shows me, and I use those comments to create future content for you guys as well, because if many people are interested in a subject, I'll be able to film something maybe more in depth about that subject. So don't be shy. And I'd like to say a big thank you to my wonderful patrons that are supporting this channel on Patreon and having lots of fun in our special little community there. Watch the video that's appearing on your screen right now, and I look forward to seeing you very soon again. Thanks for hanging out with me.